The redhead walking into Marcus's poker room wearing a leather jacket and holding a bottle of whiskey made Harrison Quade realize his Friday night just got a hell of a lot more interesting. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice carrying across the mahogany table where 5 men sat with cards and chips. Traffic was brutal. Marcus stood up, grinning. "Guys, this is Vivian Turner. We went to culinary school together before I sold out and became a boring lawyer. Vivian, meet the crew." Harrison watched as she moved around the table, shaking hands with easy confidence. She had green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and when she reached him last, her grip was firm and warm. "Harrison Quade," he said, holding her gaze perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "The real estate guy," she said, recognition flickering across her face. "I've seen your buildings downtown, guilty as charged." She pulled out the empty chair directly across from him, shrugging off her jacket to reveal a simple black shirt. "Fair warning, I take poker seriously." Marcus laughed as he dealt her in. "Vivian worked in Vegas for 3 years. She's going to clean us out." "Worked at a restaurant," she clarified, arranging her chips. "But I spent plenty of late nights at the tables after my shifts ended." The game started slow, everyone feeling each other out. Harrison had been playing with this group for 5 years, every other Friday night without fail. He knew Marcus bet conservatively, that Derek bluffed too often, that Sam folded at the first sign of pressure. But Vivian was an unknown variable, and he found himself watching her more than his cards. She played smart, folding early hands, observing patterns. When she finally went in on a hand, she took a decent pot off Derek with a straight he never saw coming. "Damn," Derek muttered, pushing chips across the table. "Marcus warned us. Where are you working now?" Harrison asked during the next deal, trying to sound casual. "I'm between restaurants," Vivian said, studying her cards. "Left my last position 2 months ago. The head chef was a nightmare, and I was tired of working under someone else's vision." "She wants to open her own place," Marcus added, raising the bet. "Been talking about it for years." Vivian's jaw tightened slightly. "Talking and doing are 2 different things. Need capital for doing." Harrison called the bet, watching her reaction. "What kind of restaurant?" "Small plates, seasonal menu that changes weekly. Focus on local ingredients and wine pairings." Her eyes met his across the table. "Real food, not the molecular gastronomy nonsense that's trendy right now." "Sounds expensive to start," he said. "About $500,000 to do it right." She laid down her cards. "Full house, which is why I'm here taking your money instead." The table groaned as she pulled in another pot. Harrison found himself smiling despite losing. There was something magnetic about her confidence, the way she owned her space without apology. 2 hours in, it was down to Harrison and Vivian in a hand, the pot climbing higher than any that night. He had a flush, solid odds. But she sat perfectly still, giving nothing away, and he realized he couldn't read her at all. "You're bluffing," he said, though he wasn't sure. "Am I?" The corner of her mouth curved up. Only one way to find out. He pushed more chips forward, and she matched him without hesitation. When they revealed their cards, her straight flush beat his regular flush, and the table erupted. "Holy shit," Sam said. "She actually did it." Vivian gathered the considerable pile of chips, and Harrison laughed, shaking his head. "You hustled us." "I told you I was serious," she said, but her eyes were warm with humor. The game continued, but Harrison noticed himself caring less about winning and more about the glimpses of personality Vivian revealed between hands. She told a story about a celebrity who'd thrown soup at her in a kitchen, acted out the whole thing with such vivid detail that everyone was crying with laughter. She asked genuine questions about their lives, remembered details, made connections. When Marcus mentioned Harrison's latest development project, she leaned forward with real interest. The one on 5th Street, with the green roof system. You know about that? Harrison was surprised. I walk past it every morning. Love what you're doing with the community spaces on the ground floor. She paused. Though if you're still planning the retail spaces, you should reconsider the ventilation setup for any restaurant tenants. The blueprints I saw in the paper looked like they'd be a nightmare for kitchen exhaust. Harrison blinked. You read architectural blueprints? Had to learn when I was designing my last kitchen layout. Turns out restaurants are basically infrastructure problems wrapped in ambience. She studied her new hand. Your setup would trap heat and grease, drive up costs for any food tenant. He made a mental note to have his team review it. She was right, he realized. They'd been so focused on the residential units they'd templated the commercial spaces without enough customization. By midnight, Vivian had won more hands than anyone else, her chip stack impressive. But she was gracious about it, buying a round of drinks with her winnings and insisting she'd just gotten lucky. Lucky, Derek scoffed. You read us like picture books. As the game wound down and people started leaving, Harrison found himself lingering, helping Marcus clean up while Vivian packed her things. She's single, by the way, Marcus said quietly, clearly trying to be subtle and failing. In case you were wondering, was I that obvious? You folded a full house in the last hand because you were distracted watching her laugh. Harrison grimaced. He didn't fold full houses. He'd built a $50 million real estate empire by reading people and making smart bets. But apparently, a redhead with a sharp mind and sharper card skills had thrown off his entire game. Marcus walked him to the door where Vivian was saying goodbye to Sam. You should come back next game, Harrison heard Sam saying. We need someone to keep Quade humble. I'll think about it, she said, then noticed Harrison approaching. Good game tonight. You destroyed me, he said honestly. You're not as bad as you think. You just telegraph your strong hands by sitting too still. She tilted her head, overcompensating for something. Great, now I'll be paranoid every hand. She laughed and he liked the sound of it. Real, unguarded. If it helps, you're better at reading people than reading cards. I saw you adjust your strategy for each player by the 3rd round. They walked out together into the cool night air. The street was quiet, just the distant sound of traffic and a dog barking somewhere. Where are you parked? Harrison asked. 2 blocks down, same direction. They fell into step together, and Harrison tried to think of something clever to say that didn't sound like he was trying too hard. Your restaurant idea, he started. The seasonal small plates thing. Have you written a full business plan? Twice. Both times I got close to finding investors, something fell through. She shoved her hands in her jacket pockets. First time the location got bought out from under me. Second time my potential partner got cold feet. But you're still thinking about it. Every single day. She glanced at him. Why do you ask? I have commercial spaces that might work. The ground floor of the 5th Street building, actually. We're still finalizing retail tenants. Vivian stopped walking. Are you seriously talking business after I just took $300 off you at poker? I'm a glutton for punishment. He stopped too, facing her under a streetlight. And you were right about the ventilation. If you have time this week, you should come see the space. Give me your professional opinion on the whole setup. She studied him with those sharp green eyes and he felt assessed, measured. Is this a business offer or are you asking me out? Harrison appreciated the directness. Can it be both? I don't mix business and personal, makes things messy. Then let's start with business. Come see the space, tell me what's wrong with it, and I'll buy you coffee for the consultation. She considered this. Wednesday afternoon works for me. They exchanged numbers, and when she smiled before walking away to her car, Harrison felt like he'd won something better than any poker pot. Over the next 3 days, he found himself thinking about her at random moments. During a meeting about zoning regulations, he wondered what she'd think of the latest project. At the gym, he remembered her story about the soup-throwing celebrity. He caught himself checking his phone too often, waiting for Wednesday. When the day finally arrived, he met her at the 5th Street building. She showed up in jeans and a blazer, her red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she had a notebook under one arm. "You came prepared," he said. "You asked for a professional opinion. I'm being professional." But she was smiling. He walked her through the space, a corner unit with high ceilings and large windows facing 2 streets. It was raw still, concrete and exposed systems, waiting for vision to transform it. Vivian moved through it like she was seeing something he couldn't. She took measurements, made notes, asked questions about load-bearing walls and utility access. She pointed out problems with the exhaust routing and suggested solutions. She explained sight lines for an open kitchen, traffic flow for servers, where the bar should go to maximize both service and ambience. Harrison found himself captivated. This was her element, and watching her work was like watching Marcus argue a case or Sam code a program. Pure competence, unmarred by ego. "The bones are perfect," she said finally, standing in what would be the center of the dining room. Corner location, natural light, high ceilings. With the right design, this could be incredible. "What would you need to make it work?" she laughed. "For me?" "I already told you. $500,000 and a miracle." "What if I offered you the space at reduced rent for the first 2 years? Vivian turned to look at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because good restaurants bring value to a building. Because you clearly know what you're doing. Because having a destination restaurant on the ground floor will help me lease the residential units upstairs." He paused. "And because I'd rather see someone with genuine passion and skill in this space than another corporate chain." She crossed her arms, suddenly guarded. "Harrison, I can't afford even reduced rent if I don't have startup capital." "You have investors." "Not anymore. After the second deal fell through, people stopped taking my calls." "What if you had a new investor? Silent partner, minority stake, hands off on operations." Understanding dawned on her face. Me? No," she shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't take charity. It's not charity, it's business. I've made my money by betting on potential." He gestured around the space. "This has potential, you have potential. And unlike poker, I'm good at reading real estate investments. You barely know me. I know you're smart enough to read architectural plans and catch problems my team missed. I know you're confident enough to walk into a room full of strangers and own it. I know Marcus trusts you, and I trust Marcus." He met her eyes. "And I know that you play poker the same way I buy buildings. You calculate the odds, manage the risk, and go all in when the cards are right." She was quiet for a long moment, looking around the space. He could see her mind working, see her wanting it. "I'd need full creative control," she said finally. "Menu, design, hiring, everything. Done. And I'd want it in writing that this isn't charity. Market rate investment terms, proper contract, everything legal and above board. I wouldn't have it any other way. And we keep business and personal completely separate." Harrison nodded, even though the last condition stung a little. "Whatever makes you comfortable." She stuck out her hand. "Then let's talk numbers." They spent the next 2 hours at a coffee shop, Vivian walking him through her business plan on her laptop. It was thorough, professional, and smart. She'd thought through everything from sourcing to staffing to marketing. She had backup plans for her backup plans. "This is impressive," Harrison said, scrolling through the financial projections. "Why did your last investors back out?" She hesitated. "First one wanted creative control, wanted to turn it into a steakhouse because that's what he knew. Second one was my ex-boyfriend, and when we broke up, so did the deal. That's rough. It taught me not to mix business with personal relationships. She gave him a meaningful look. Understood. Harrison pulled out his phone and called his attorney. David, I need you to draw up an investment contract, limited partnership restaurant venture. He went through the terms while Vivian listened, her expression carefully neutral. When he hung up, she was staring at him. You're serious about this? I told you I bet on potential. What if I fail? What if the restaurant crashes and you lose your money? Then I'll write it off and you'll have learned from the experience. He leaned back in his chair. But you're not going to fail. You're too stubborn and you're too good. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. Okay, let's do this. The next month was chaos. Vivian worked 18-hour days and Harrison found himself pulled into her orbit. He'd stop by the space after his own meetings, finding her arguing with contractors or testing paint samples. She'd ask his opinion on layouts, and he'd offer perspective from other restaurant tenants he'd worked with. They kept things professional, but it was getting harder. He'd catch himself watching the way she gestured when she was excited, or how she pulled at her ponytail when she was frustrated. He noticed that she took her coffee black, that she was left-handed, that she hummed while she worked. One evening, he found her sitting in the middle of the empty space, surrounded by fabric swatches and looking overwhelmed. What's wrong? He asked, sitting down beside her on the concrete floor. I can't decide on the seating. Everything looks wrong. She gestured at the samples. This is too formal, this is too casual, this looks cheap, this is too expensive. What feeling do you want people to have when they sit down? She thought about it. Comfortable enough to stay for 3 hours. Special enough that they remember it, like they're in someone's home but elevated. Harrison picked up a deep navy fabric with subtle texture. This one. Really? Pairs with the wood tones you picked for the bar, doesn't compete with the food for attention, ages well with wear. He handed it to her, and it feels expensive without being pretentious. She ran her fingers over it and he saw her shoulders relax. You're right, how did you know? I've furnished a lot of properties. You learn what works. He paused. You're doing great, by the way. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you are. Vivian looked at him and something passed between them, something that had been building since that first poker night. Thank you, she said quietly, for all of this, for believing in me. Easy to believe in someone when they're this talented. She held his gaze for a moment too long, then looked away. We should keep this professional. Right, professional. He stood up, offering her a hand to help her up. When she took it, her palm warm against his, he told himself to let go. He didn't, not immediately, neither did she. Then her phone rang, breaking the moment. She pulled away to answer it, and Harrison excused himself, needing air and distance. Marcus called him the next night. So you're investing in Vivian's restaurant. News travels fast. She called me freaking out, half excited and half terrified. Marcus paused. You like her? I like her business plan. Harrison, I've known you for a decade. I've seen you negotiate deals worth tens of millions without blinking. You don't personally oversee tenant improvements for a restaurant investment unless there's another reason. Harrison sighed. She's incredible, Marcus, but she's made it very clear we're keeping things professional. Because she's scared. The last guy she dated screwed her over professionally, and it nearly killed her dream. Marcus's voice softened. But I've known Vivian for 12 years, and I've never heard her talk about anyone the way she talks about you. She barely talks about me. Exactly. When she likes someone, she gets quiet about it. Protective. Marcus laughed. Trust me, give it time. Once the restaurant stress calms down, she'll have space to think about other things. Harrison wanted to believe that, but he forced himself to keep his distance over the next few weeks. He reviewed contracts, approved expenses, and stayed away from the construction site unless specifically asked to weigh in on something. But he came to the soft opening. Vivian had invited the poker group and a select group of friends and family to test the service before the official launch. Harrison arrived to find the space transformed. The corner location glowed with warm light, the interior a perfect balance of sophisticated and welcoming. The open kitchen gleamed with stainless steel, and he could see Vivian through the window, expediting orders in a white chef's coat, her face intense with concentration. The food was exceptional. Small plates that were creative without being gimmicky, flavors that surprised and satisfied. Harrison ordered half the menu and wanted to order more. Around him, people were having the same reaction, exclaiming over dishes, ordering seconds. When Vivian finally emerged from the kitchen near the end of service, she looked exhausted and radiant. She made her way to Harrison's table where he sat with Marcus and Sam. "Verdict?" she asked, and he could hear the nerves under the confidence. "Best meal I've had in 5 years," Harrison said honestly. "This is going to be a massive success." She broke into a smile that transformed her whole face. "You really think so?" "I know so. Look around." The dining room was full, everyone lingering over drinks and desserts, no one in a hurry to leave. "You created something special." She looked around at her restaurant, her dream made real, and he saw tears shine in her eyes before she blinked them away. "I need to get back to the kitchen, but thank you for everything." After she left, Marcus kicked him under the table. "You're an idiot if you don't tell her how you feel." Bad timing. She's stressed with the launch. There's never going to be perfect timing. She'll always be busy, you'll always be busy. That's life. Marcus finished his wine. "But don't wait too long. Someone else will notice how amazing she is." The official opening 2 weeks later was a triumph. Food bloggers and critics came, and the reviews were glowing. Within a month, getting a reservation became difficult. Within 2 months, Vivian had a waiting list. Harrison watched from a distance, proud and a little heartsick. She was thriving, exactly as he'd known she would. But the professional boundary between them felt more solid than ever. He got monthly reports from her on the restaurant's performance, always thorough and impersonal. He saw her at poker nights, which had moved to the restaurant's private dining room on their off nights, but always with the group around them. He dated other people, trying to move on. A lawyer who worked in his building, a friend of a friend who was nice and attractive. But every date ended the same way, with him making excuses about early meetings and going home alone, unable to stop comparing them to a redhead with green eyes who'd beaten him at cards and stolen something much more valuable than poker chips. 4 months after the restaurant opened, Harrison stopped by late one evening. He'd been working on a new property acquisition, and the office was near Vivian's place. The dining room was closed, but he could see light in the kitchen. He knocked, and she appeared at the door, surprised to see him. "Harrison, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see if you needed anything." It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. She studied him for a moment, then opened the door wider. "Come in. I'm testing recipes for the spring menu." The kitchen was warm and smelled incredible. She had stations set up with various ingredients, notebooks full of scribbled notes. She moved back to her work while he leaned against a counter, watching. "How's the new property coming?" she asked, dicing vegetables with casual precision. "Good. Complex zoning situation, but we're working through it. You love it though, the challenge." "Yeah, I do," he paused. "Like you love this." She glanced up at him and smiled. "I really do, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts maybe." She offered him tastes of what she was working on, asking for feedback, adjusting seasonings. They fell into an easy rhythm, talking about work and life and nothing in particular. It felt natural, comfortable in a way that made Harrison's chest ache. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally as she plated a dish that looked like art. "Sure. Are we really going to keep pretending there's nothing between us?" Vivian's hand stilled. She didn't look at him. "Harrison. Because I've tried, Vivian. I've stayed away, I've been professional, I've given you space. But I can't stop thinking about you." He pushed off the counter, moving closer but not touching. "And I think you feel it too." She set down her knife carefully. "I do," she admitted quietly, "but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of it going wrong and losing the restaurant, of mixing everything up again." She finally looked at him. "Of getting hurt." "I can't promise it won't be complicated," Harrison said, "but I can promise I'll never use business as leverage. The restaurant is yours, no matter what happens between us. That contract stands regardless. You'd put that in writing." "Already had my attorney draft an amendment. It's been sitting on my desk for 2 months." He pulled out his phone, showing her the email. "Your ownership terms are protected no matter what. Business and personal are completely separated legally." She read the document, and he watched emotions flicker across her face. "You've been planning this for 2 months. I've been hoping for 2 months." He put his phone away. "But I need to know if you feel the same way, because if you don't, I'll back off. I'll stay professional. We'll keep things as they are. But if you do feel something, Vivian, then maybe we can stop pretending." She was quiet for so long he thought he'd miscalculated everything. Then she reached up and pulled off her chef's hat, setting it aside. "I think about you constantly," she said. "When I'm cooking, I wonder what you'd think of a dish. When something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell. At poker night, I sit across from you on purpose because I like looking at you." She laughed shakily. "I've been miserable trying to keep my distance." Relief flooded through him. "So stop keeping your distance. Just like that, just like that." She moved toward him, closing the space between them, and when she reached up to touch his face, he felt like every poker chip he'd lost to her had been worth it for this moment. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "Me too," he admitted. "But some bets are worth taking." She kissed him then, and it was better than he'd imagined. She tasted like the herbs she'd been testing, and she fit against him perfectly. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound of happiness that he wanted to hear again and again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was smiling. That was either a really good decision or a really bad one. Let's find out. He kissed her again, softer this time, savoring it. They stayed in the kitchen for another hour, stealing kisses between conversation, unable to stop touching each other now that the barrier was down. She told him about her childhood in Oregon, growing up in her grandmother's kitchen. He told her about buying his first building at 24 with borrowed money and sheer determination. "I want to take you on a proper date," Harrison said as they finally locked up the restaurant. "Dinner somewhere nice. I spend every night surrounded by fancy food." She laced her fingers through his. "Take me somewhere unexpected." The next evening he picked her up and drove them to a food truck park on the east side. Her delighted laugh when she realized where they were made his heart skip. "This is perfect," she said, surveying the options. "I love food trucks." They ordered from 4 different vendors, sharing everything, sitting at a picnic table under string lights. She told him which trucks had the best technique, what shortcuts they were taking, what inspired her. He told her about his plans to develop a food hall concept, asking her opinion on layout and vendor mix. "You're asking me for work advice on a date," she said, amused. "You're the expert. I'd be stupid not to." He stole a bite of her taco. "Besides, I like hearing you talk about food. You get this look on your face like nothing else exists." "What look?" "Pure passion. It's beautiful." She blushed, and he loved that he could make her do that, On their second date, she took him to a farmer's market at dawn, introducing him to her suppliers, showing him how she selected produce. She held up vegetables like they were treasures, explaining what she looked for, and he found himself fascinated by her expertise. On their third date, they went to a movie and made out in the back row like teenagers, and it was perfect. They kept it quiet at first, not announcing anything but not hiding either. Marcus figured it out immediately the next poker night when he saw them arrive together. "Finally," was all he said, grinning. The others noticed the way Harrison watched Vivian, the way she touched his shoulder when she laughed, and there were knowing looks exchanged, but no one made it weird. It helped that Vivian still played to win, taking a massive pot off Harrison in the night's biggest hand. "You're still hustling me," he said, watching her stack chips. "Always will be," she replied, eyes sparkling. "Keep you humble." As weeks turned into months, they found a rhythm. She worked brutal hours at the restaurant and he had his own demanding schedule, but they made time. Morning coffee before she went to the market. Late dinners after service ended. Lazy Sundays when the restaurant was closed, spent in bed reading the paper and ordering takeout. He learned that she sang off key while cooking at home, that she was terrible at returning phone calls, that she cried at animal shelter commercials. She learned that he was an insomniac who did his best thinking at 3 in the morning, that he had a sweet tooth he tried to hide, that he called his mother every Sunday without fail. "Bring her to meet my parents," Harrison said one morning, 6 months in. Vivian looked up from her coffee, startled. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." He kissed her temple. "Unless you're not ready, I'm ready, just nervous." She paused. "They're going to think I'm with you for your money. My mother is going to love you because you're brilliant and you make me happy." He pulled her onto his lap. "And because you're the only person who consistently beats me at poker." Meeting his parents was less terrifying than Vivian expected. His mother, Patricia, was warm and welcoming, and his father, Henry, was a quieter version of Harrison. They asked genuine questions about her restaurant, and Patricia made a reservation for the following week. "He's different with you," Patricia said when they had a moment alone in the kitchen. "Lighter, happier." "He makes me happy too," Vivian said honestly. "Good, hold on to that." Patricia squeezed her hand. "And don't let him work too much. He has a tendency to forget there's life outside of business." When Harrison's parents came to the restaurant, Vivian prepared a special tasting menu. She sent out course after course, each one designed to tell a story. Harrison watched his mother's face as she tasted each dish, saw her eyes widen with appreciation, and felt a fierce pride in Vivian. "She's extraordinary," his mother said. "Don't mess this up." "I don't plan to," Harrison replied, but things couldn't stay perfect forever. A year into their relationship, a national restaurant group approached Vivian about franchising her concept. It was an incredible opportunity, potentially life-changing money, but it would mean giving up some creative control and expanding rapidly. She came to Harrison's apartment after the meeting, conflicted and stressed. "I don't know what to do," she said, pacing his living room. "It's everything I thought I wanted. Financial security, recognition, growth. But it means changing everything that makes the restaurant special." "What does your gut tell you?" Harrison asked. "To say no, but is that stupid? Am I self-sabotaging?" "You're not stupid and you're not self-sabotaging." He pulled her down to sit beside him. "You built something unique because you didn't compromise. If you start compromising now, it stops being yours. But the money's good, but you're already successful, the restaurant's profitable, you're getting recognition, you're doing what you love on your terms." He tucked her hair behind her ear. "Don't change your vision because someone else sees dollar signs." She leaned against him. "You're right. I just needed to hear someone else say it. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you either way, but I love that you're stubborn enough to do things your way." She turned the offer down, and while there was a moment of doubt, she felt lighter afterward. The restaurant continued to thrive, and she started getting invitations to cook at events, to collaborate with other chefs. She built the career she wanted, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Harrison's business continued to grow. He opened a food hall concept, consulting with Vivian on every aspect. She helped him select vendors, design the space, create the right atmosphere. It was a huge success, and he credited her in every interview. "You're going to make me famous," she complained after another article mentioned her input. "You're already famous. I'm just making sure you get credit for your ideas." He pulled her close. "Besides, I like people knowing you're brilliant." 2 years into their relationship, Harrison woke up one morning and knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend his life with this woman. He wanted every morning to start with her messy hair and sleepy smile. He wanted to celebrate her successes and support her through challenges. He wanted everything. He started planning. The proposal needed to be perfect, personal, meaningful. He enlisted Marcus's help, swearing him to secrecy. "About time," Marcus said. "I was beginning to think you'd never ask. I wanted to be sure." "You were sure 6 months in." "You've just been overthinking it." Harrison couldn't argue with that. He planned it for a Friday night at the restaurant after closing. He told Vivian he needed to discuss some business about the building, which wasn't entirely a lie. He had signed over the restaurant space to her name completely, and he wanted to give her the deed. When she let him in that night, tired but happy after a busy service, he was waiting in the dining room with a single table set up. Candles, flowers, and a bottle of expensive wine. "What's all this?" she asked, confused. "Sit with me for a minute." She sat, curiosity and maybe a hint of worry on her face. "Harrison, you're making me nervous." Good nervous or bad nervous, undecided. He pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. "I want you to have this." She opened it, scanning the document inside. Her eyes widened. "This is the deed to the building, the whole building. I'm signing it over to you, the restaurant, the residential units, everything. It's yours, free and clear." "I can't accept this. Harrison, this is worth millions. And you've turned it into something worth more. You've made it a landmark, a destination. You deserve to own it." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I don't want you ever worrying that your success is tied to our relationship. This is yours, no matter what." Tears were streaming down her face. "No matter what." "Are you breaking up with me?" "The opposite, actually." He slid out of his chair and onto one knee, pulling out the small box he'd been carrying for weeks. "Vivian Turner, you walked into Marcus's poker night and took everything from me. My money, my focus, my heart. You've made me happier than I knew I could be. You challenge me, inspire me, and make every day better just by being in it. Will you marry me?" She was crying in earnest now, nodding before she could speak. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." The ring was a green emerald surrounded by diamonds, unique and beautiful like her. It fit perfectly, and when he stood to kiss her, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much," she said between kisses. "Even though you just made the most dramatic business proposal combo in history." "Had to make sure you knew they were separate," he said. "The building is yours regardless, but I really hope you marry me anyway. Always going to marry you, even if you were broke." She kissed him again. "Though I'm not giving back this building. It's an excellent investment." They called Marcus immediately, who pretended to be surprised and failed completely. Then they called their parents, and Patricia cried with joy while Henry told Harrison he'd made the right choice. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the restaurant, surrounded by close friends and family. Vivian wore a simple dress the color of champagne, and Harrison couldn't stop staring at her as she walked down the aisle between the tables. Marcus was the best man, and his toast was perfect. I brought Vivian to poker night thinking she'd win some money and have fun. I didn't expect her to win Harrison's entire heart. But watching them together, watching how they support each other and challenge each other and love each other, I can't imagine two people more perfectly matched. To the couple who proved that sometimes the best bets are the ones you don't see coming. Their first dance was to an old jazz song, and Harrison held her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume mixed with the herbs she'd been cooking with earlier. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Quade?" he murmured. "Like the luckiest woman alive," she said. "And starving. When do we get to eat?" He laughed, spinning her. "We're cutting the cake in 10 minutes. I'm going to be a terrible wife. All I think about is food. You're going to be a perfect wife. And I'm going to be the guy who gains 20 pounds from married life because my wife is the best chef in the city." The restaurant continued to flourish. Vivian opened a second, smaller location focusing on brunch, and it was immediately popular. She wrote a cookbook that became a bestseller. She appeared on cooking shows and won awards. But she never franchised, never compromised her vision, and every dish that left her kitchen was exactly what she intended it to be. Harrison expanded his real estate empire, but he became more selective, focusing on projects that contributed positively to communities. He developed affordable housing mixed with commercial spaces. He created public parks and community centers. He built things that mattered, and Vivian's influence was evident in every decision. They bought a house together, a beautiful old Victorian that needed work. They spent weekends renovating it, arguing good-naturedly about paint colors and countertops. Harrison built Vivian a dream kitchen, and she cooked elaborate dinners for their friends. On Friday nights, they still hosted poker games, now at their house. The group had grown, adding a few of Vivian's chef friends and some of Harrison's business associates. Vivian still won more often than not, and Harrison still watched her with the same captivated expression he'd worn that first night. 2 years into their marriage, Vivian came home from a doctor's appointment with news. Harrison was in his home office, reviewing plans for a new building, when she appeared in the doorway. "We're pregnant," she said, and the joy on her face was brighter than any spotlight. Harrison crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "Are you serious, completely serious, about 12 weeks along?" She pulled back to look at him. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He kissed her, soft and reverent. "We're having a baby." They told their families that weekend, and the celebrations were joyful and tearful. Patricia immediately started planning, and Vivian's mother flew in from Oregon to help prepare. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Vivian complained about not being able to taste test wine for pairings and having to leave the kitchen during particularly strong smell days. She worked until her 8th month, finally agreeing to take maternity leave when Harrison pointed out she could barely reach the stove over her belly. Their daughter was born on a cool October evening, arriving 2 weeks early and completely perfect. They named her Grace Helen Quade, and the moment the nurses placed her in Harrison's arms, he felt his world shift into even sharper focus. Vivian watched him hold their daughter, saw the tears on his face, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. "She's beautiful," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. "She has your eyes," Vivian said, "and your nose." He carefully transferred the baby to Vivian's arms. "We made a person, an actual person." "We're going to be terrible at this," Vivian said, but she was smiling, "Probably. But we'll figure it out together." They brought Grace home to the Victorian house they'd renovated, to the nursery they'd painted soft yellow. Those first few months were exhausting and magical in equal measure. Harrison took paternity leave, and they stumbled through diaper changes and midnight feedings together, operating on no sleep and pure love. Marcus came to visit and held Grace with the careful reverence of someone who'd never held a baby before. "She's so tiny." "She's perfect," Vivian said, watching her daughter sleep in Marcus's arms. "You two are going to be amazing parents," Marcus said. "Though I'm going to teach her to play poker as soon as she's old enough." "Absolutely not," Harrison said. "Definitely yes," Vivian countered. "She needs to know how to read people and manage risk." Harrison groaned. "I'm going to be outnumbered in my own house." "You already are," Vivian pointed out, kissing his cheek. As Grace grew, the house filled with toys and laughter. She was a happy baby who became a curious toddler, always investigating, always questioning. She had Harrison's analytical mind and Vivian's fearlessness. Vivian gradually returned to work, but she restructured her schedule to be more balanced. She promoted her sous chef to head chef at the flagship restaurant and took more of an oversight role. She still created menus and trained staff, but she made sure to be home for bedtime stories and weekend pancakes. Harrison did the same, delegating more and focusing on strategic decisions rather than day-to-day operations. He'd built a strong team he trusted, and he learned to step back. They had family dinners at the big table in their kitchen, Grace sitting in her high chair making a mess of whatever Vivian had prepared. They took walks in the neighborhood, Harrison pushing the stroller while Vivian pointed out gardens and architecture. They were building a life, piece by piece, day by day. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they went back to the restaurant for a private dinner after hours. Patricia and Henry were babysitting Grace, and Harrison and Vivian had the whole evening to themselves. Vivian had prepared the same dishes from the night he proposed, each one bringing back memories. They sat at the same table, older now, with more laugh lines and gray hairs starting to show, but the way they looked at each other hadn't changed at all. 5 years, Vivian said, raising her wine glass. "Feels like yesterday and forever at the same time." "Best 5 years of my life," Harrison said, clinking his glass against hers. "Even better than I imagined when I was watching you destroy me at poker. I still can't believe that's how we met. If Marcus hadn't invited me to that game, if I'd been too tired to go, if you'd decided to skip that night, we would have found each other some other way," Harrison said with certainty. "I'm convinced of it. That's romantic of you. You make me romantic." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "You make me better at everything." She squeezed his fingers. "The feeling is extremely mutual." They talked about the future over dinner. About maybe having another baby, about expanding Vivian's cookbook into a series, about Harrison's plan to start a nonprofit focused on community development. They talked about teaching Grace to cook, about family vacations, about getting old together. "I want everything with you," Vivian said. "All the boring parts and all the exciting parts and everything in between. Even the parts where I work too late and forget to take out the trash, even those parts," she smiled. "Though I'm still going to complain about the trash. Fair enough." As they were leaving, Vivian stopped at the door, looking back at the restaurant. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For believing in me when I didn't quite believe in myself. For seeing potential where others saw risk. For loving me exactly as I am." Harrison wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Thank you for walking into that poker game and completely changing my life. For being brave enough to take chances. For choosing me." She turned in his arms, kissing him under the streetlight, and it felt exactly like that first kiss in her kitchen years ago. New and familiar all at once. They drove home to their sleeping daughter and their Victorian house, to the life they'd built from a poker game and a risky investment and 2 people willing to bet on each other. 3 years later, they had a son, Henry Marcus Quade, and their family felt complete. Grace became a protective older sister, always watching out for her little brother. She developed a love of cooking, spending hours in the kitchen with Vivian, learning techniques, and asking endless questions. Henry was quieter, more thoughtful, with a fascination for buildings and how things were constructed. Harrison would take him to construction sites, explaining load-bearing walls and foundation systems, and the boy would listen with intense concentration. The restaurants continued to thrive. Vivian opened a third location, a small counter-service place that focused on takeout, making her food accessible to a wider audience. Critics called her a genius, and lines formed around the block, but she stayed grounded, focused on the craft rather than the fame. Harrison's company became one of the most respected development firms in the city, known for projects that balanced profitability with social responsibility. He sat on nonprofit boards and mentored young entrepreneurs. He built a legacy beyond buildings. On weekends, they still had poker nights, though now they happened after the kids were in bed. The group had evolved over the years. Some members moved away, new ones joined. But Marcus was always there, the constant friend who'd brought them together. One night, after everyone else had left and they were cleaning up, Marcus raised his glass. "To the best poker introduction I ever made." "To the worst poker player at the table," Vivian countered, and Marcus laughed. "I may be terrible at poker, but I'm excellent at matchmaking." He looked at his friends, his family really, and smiled. "You two were always meant to find each other." After Marcus left, Harrison and Vivian stood in their kitchen, his arms around her waist, her head against his chest. "He's right, you know," Harrison said. "We were always meant to find each other." "Destiny?" Vivian asked, amused. "Something like that." He kissed the top of her head. "Or maybe just luck. Really, really good luck. I'll take either." She tilted her face up to kiss him properly. "As long as I get to keep you." "Forever," he promised. "You're stuck with me." "Good," she said, "because I'm never folding this hand." Years continued to pass, each one adding depth and texture to their story. Grace went to culinary school, following in her mother's footsteps but carving her own path. Henry studied architecture, blending his parents' passions into something uniquely his. The kids grew up surrounded by love and good food and parents who genuinely liked each other, who still held hands at the dinner table and stole kisses in the kitchen. Harrison and Vivian grew older together gracefully. Gray hair turned to silver, laugh lines deepened, but the way they looked at each other never changed. He still watched her work in the kitchen with the same fascination. She still beat him at poker with the same competitive gleam in her eye. On their 20th anniversary, they went back to Marcus's place, where it had all started. Marcus hosted a poker game in their honor, and the whole original group came, some flying in from across the country. 20 years since you walked into my poker night," Marcus said, dealing cards. "Best decision I ever made was inviting you, Vivian." "Second best," Vivian corrected. "Best decision was introducing me to this guy." She gestured at Harrison, who was organizing his chips with the same methodical precision he'd had that first night. They played until late, and when Vivian won the final pot with a straight flush, exactly like that first night, everyone laughed at the symmetry of it. Later, as they drove home through familiar streets, past buildings Harrison had developed and restaurants where Vivian's influence could be tasted, Harrison reached over and took her hand. "You ever think about that first night?" he asked. "What would have happened if things had gone differently?" "Never," Vivian said honestly. "Because I can't imagine any other life than this one. Can't imagine not having you, not having our kids, not having built everything we've built together." "Me either." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. You took everything from me that night, and I've spent 20 years being grateful for it." She laughed, the sound as bright and genuine as it had been 2 decades ago. "I love you, Harrison Quade. I love you too, Vivian Quade. Always have, always will." They pulled into their driveway, home to the Victorian house full of memories and love and laughter. Inside, their grown children were visiting for the anniversary weekend. The lights were on, welcoming them back. Harrison walked around to open Vivian's door, offering his hand just like always. She took it, just like always, and they walked into their house together, into the beautiful life they'd built from a poker game and a leap of faith and two hearts willing to go all in. The redhead who'd walked into that poker night had indeed taken everything. His attention, his heart, his future. And in return, she'd given him a life richer than any building he'd ever constructed, more valuable than any fortune he could have amassed. She'd given him love, partnership, family, and happiness. Harrison Quade had made a lot of smart bets in his life, but betting on Vivian Turner was the best decision he'd ever made. And as they sat down to a late dinner with their children, sharing food and stories and laughter, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd won the most important hand of all. He'd won a lifetime with the woman who'd taken everything and given him so much more in return.